Hello and good evening. Today it is Friday, March 24th, 2023. And for this video today, I want to start by dedicating this video to my longtime viewer, Donnell. Donnell, you asked if I was going to do a video to discuss this, and I thought, you know what? When I saw your comment, I thought, I'll do a video on this topic that you've mentioned here. So, without further ado, I'm going to share my thoughts on a rumor that supposedly the National Hockey League is rumored to be considering expanding to 34 teams. So, truth is, guys, I just want to throw a heads up here before I go on any further. Number one, so far, this is nothing but a rumor at this point in time as I'm filming this video. And number two, if I find that this video is exceptionally long, if it starts to hit about a half an hour in length, what I'm probably going to end up doing is I'm probably going to end up splitting this into two parts. I mean, on one side of the coin, yeah, it would be better to fit this all into one video, but if I'm talking for a long time and there's a lot of points I want to get across and I don't have enough time to do it, unless it becomes one super long video, then I think it'd be better for you guys and for me too to split it into two parts. So another thing I do want to mention too is you will not see any visuals. This will be a podcast style video where it's nothing but a black screen as you see here. It'll just be me talking and sharing my thoughts. So anyways, let's get into it. Let's talk about the two cities that are supposedly rumored to have expressed interest in getting expansion franchises. So this is something that has been discussed by Kevin Weeks, who is a reporter now for, I believe, ESPN in the States. This has also been discussed by Elliot Friedman, and I've even seen this discussed by the Hockey Guy here on YouTube. And in my opinion, if all three of them are discussing this, as far as I'm concerned, this is a case of where there's smoke, there's fire. After the National Hockey League made over $1 billion in expansion fees, expanding into Las Vegas and now in the past couple of years, Seattle, I would be the least bit surprised if there is some legitimacy to these rumors, or should I say legitimacy in general. Not just some, but yeah, legitimacy for sure. I mean, the way I look at it is like this. I think there is way too much potential revenues to be made from additional expansion that at the bare minimum, the National Hockey League would at least consider these expressions of interest from potential ownership groups to get their own NHL franchises. If I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that all expansion money revenue goes to the owners exclusively and not the players. And if that is incorrect information, please feel free to correct me in the comment section down below, because if I remember correctly, I heard that supposedly the expansion fees the National Hockey League got when they expanded to Vegas and now Seattle more recently, I think all of that money went straight to the owners and not a dime of it went to the players. So, also, not only with that as well, but think of all the money the NHL has lost in the past few years because of the pandemic. This adding 2 additional teams to expand the NHL now up to 34 teams would definitely provide a huge financial shot in the arm that the National Hockey League could probably use a little bit more now than they have maybe ever, at least in the modern era because of the pandemic. The 2019-20 season was abruptly canceled in March of 2020. They ended up having an expanded playoff or a play-in round to try and make as fair of a opportunity for as many teams as possible to get into the playoffs when they decided to have their special bubble format in Edmonton, and I think it was Toronto as well, that hosted the Eastern Conference teams up until they got to the conference finals. Then they had the Eastern teams go to Edmonton, and they exclusively had the Stanley Cup final played in Rogers Place in Edmonton. So, of course, that was played without fans. The shortened 2021 season was played where either there were no fans allowed, especially here in Canada, and even when there were some places like Arizona and Florida that did start to allow fans into the arenas, at first it was only with limited capacity crowds. So there were definitely a lot of financial losses there. And I'm sure the owners are thinking, well, hey, this would be an immediate way to alleviate those losses. And for that reason, I could see the NHL saying, hey, if there's 2 ownership groups that are interested and they have the money and the facilities to pay for franchise fees, expansion fees, and to pay salaries for players, they're probably thinking, hey, with all the money we've lost, this would be an amazing way to make most of it, if not all of it, back. And it would certainly help. So, to me, this is not something that really surprises me. And let's get into the 2 cities that have been rumored as potential, or where there's been rumors about them applying to potentially join the NHL. One of those cities has been Houston. That's one of the cities that got mentioned. And the other is, get this, Atlanta yet again. So let's start by discussing the Houston rumor. Houston is probably the biggest TV market that doesn't have an NHL team left in the United States. And Houston has hockey history dating back to the World Hockey Association with the old Houston Aeros. And they would have an instant rivalry with the Dallas Stars. Houston has also been a well-discussed potential landing spot for the Arizona Coyotes if their arena situation does not improve. If they cannot get a new arena built in Tempe, then a lot of rumors have discussed and said that Houston is likely where the Coyotes will relocate to if they cannot get a new arena built in Arizona. Now, speaking of the Coyotes, I want to divulge into that a little bit here in this video as well. Because with the Coyotes, there is a plan to have a referendum with voters in Tempe, Arizona, and there's going to be a vote in, I believe, May of this year, 2023. And if that vote goes through, then Tempe voters will allow the city of Tempe to allocate public money to help build a brand spanking new NHL arena in Tempe for the Coyotes to move into once it is built. So, with that vote coming up in May, I'm pretty sure it's May, correct me if I'm wrong. With that vote coming up, the idea is to take public money to help put into a brand new development where I believe the site is near an airport, but supposedly, if I remember reading it correctly, it's a former landfill site. And it's basically a big empty area or a big empty parcel of land. And if this development goes through, then there would be, I believe, 2 new towers built, a concert venue, or 2 new hotels, I believe, hotel towers, a concert venue, I remember that, and most importantly, a brand spanking new NHL-sized arena for the Coyotes to move into once it is built, instead of playing in the 5,000-seat Mullet Arena where they've moved to this season, and for at least the next 2 to 3 seasons, depending on how their arena situation goes with the upcoming vote in Tempe. Now, with this proposed development of building hotels, a concert venue, and an NHL arena for the Coyotes, that can also be a venue for concerts and other events when the Coyotes aren't playing, and the fact that I believe it's also on a landfill site or a former landfill site, I got to be honest, I don't see how this vote will not go through. The reason I think, and this is something that I want to add into this video as well, that the reason I think that Houston is now being brought up by Kevin Weeks, Elliot Friedman, and even the hockey guy as a rumored city with expressed interest to get an expansion franchise now is because, by the sounds of things, I think that the Coyotes will end up getting a new arena built in Tempe. With how much and for how long and how hard the NHL has insisted on keeping the Coyotes in Arizona and not giving up on them, I gotta admit, I don't see this deal falling through. I don't see the Tempe vote being a no. I just don't. I would honestly be shocked if the Coyotes end up getting rejected in terms of this vote to build an arena and use taxpayer money, or at least I think it's taxpayer bonds, I can't remember, or Tempe city bonds, to provide funds to help build this arena. I think that judging by what's being proposed, I think there is way too much economic impact that taxpayers are not going to want Tempe to miss out on. And I think that if they had a concert venue, an arena, hotels, there'd be jobs, there'd be annual economic revenues for that region. And I think it probably would be a case of short-term pain for long-term gain. But I could be wrong too. I don't want to say that I know that it would be successful, because I don't. But what I'm saying is, by the sounds of it, in my opinion, I have my doubts that the Coyotes won't get this pulled off. I do think that this Tempe arena vote will go through, and I do think they will eventually move to a new facility in Tempe. And once they do that, then they are not going anywhere, and their rumors of relocation will be kiboshed instantly. And for the first time in far too long, we won't have to hear about relocation rumors anymore, because, hey, they'll actually have a permanent home now, and the NHL won't let them go anywhere. And if they've got a new facility, well, all the best to them. I mean, if they can make it work in Arizona, great. But I have to be honest, I'm still skeptical that hockey's going to work long term in Arizona. Do I want to be proven wrong? Yes. But I got to admit, I'm still skeptical. But that also explains why Houston would now be being brought up as a potential expansion city for the NHL. Now, they do have the Toyota Center, where the Houston Rockets of the NBA currently play in. And I've heard that supposedly the arena can be converted into an NHL arena. Now, with an ice surface to NHL standards. I'm pretty sure that's correct, or they would not be discussing Houston. But I would not be surprised if the NHL would eventually want this franchise to be playing in its own NHL-specific facility, which I can appreciate that. I've seen situations like, say, for example, the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, or even the old Key Arena before it was gutted and renovated so that it could be a proper arena for Seattle's NHL team, the Kraken, where the scoreboards were hanging over a blue line rather than center ice. And arenas where they have obstructed views for hockey, where with basketball, there's not a problem. I'm not sure what it's like in the Toyota Center in Houston, but if there's situations like that, then obviously they would want an arena that's NHL specific. But another thing that comes up with that is you have to have an arena built. And if you don't have an arena, well, good luck, Chuck. Now, the other city that's been discussed is Atlanta in this rumor. And I find that really interesting because Atlanta has not only failed once, it has failed twice. The Atlanta Thrashers relocated to Winnipeg a dozen years ago now, 12 years ago. I mean, I'm even more skeptical of having Atlanta and Arizona both in the league and having them both work out. I mean, I'm extraordinarily I'm already skeptical about Arizona working out, even if they do get this new arena built in Tempe, which I think they will. I think it will work out for the Coyotes, but I'm still skeptical that it's going to actually lead to a long-term success plan for the Coyotes in Arizona. I'm not going to lie. If you're a Coyotes fan, I'm sure you don't like me saying that, but that's just how I feel. That's my opinion. You don't have to like it. And as for being a skeptic, I'm honestly 100% skeptical that the idea of a third NHL franchise in Atlanta will all of a sudden finally work out. Now, this rumor is interesting because the Thrashers used to play in Phillips Arena. Now, if it's still called Phillips Arena, then okay. But if it's not called Phillips Arena, then I don't know what its new name is, and I'm going to refer to it as Phillips Arena because that's what I remember it being last time I talked anything to do with when it was called Phillips Arena, it was still relevant to me because the Thrashers were still in the National Hockey League and not playing in Winnipeg, where they've been ever since for the past dozen years now, as of this video, of course. Now, what I've really found interesting about the Atlanta rumor is supposedly there's an interested potential ownership group that would actually like to build an NHL arena in a suburb of Atlanta called Alpharetta. Now, I find that really interesting. I mean, they've got the arena where the Atlanta Hawks play now that the Thrashers used to play in. But it also wouldn't surprise me that they would want their own arena so that they're not dealing with logistical and scheduling issues with the Hawks, the Atlanta Hawks basketball team in the NBA. If for that reason, I can appreciate them maybe wanting to do their own, or to build their own arena. But that's the thing. Before this even works out, even before they make an expansion bid, they would have to have an arena plan with the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and have that arena guaranteed to be built. I mean, could they start this new Atlanta team in Phillips Arena? And if it's not called that anymore, I apologize. I don't know what the name of it now is, because it is now, if it's changed name, if the arena's changed name, because I honestly don't follow basketball. But I could see if they had a plan where, okay, we'll start by playing the first 2 or 3 seasons in Phillips Arena, where the Thrashers used to play before they relocated to Winnipeg, then eventually moved to a brand new facility in Alpharetta, just outside of Atlanta. I could see that working out. But I haven't heard anything about a new arena being built in Alpharetta. And unless they can actually get an arena built, then I'm skeptical. I have my doubts that this is actually, or has a high likelihood of happening, at least anytime soon. I wouldn't be surprised if this is more long-term than short-term, but I could be wrong. Now, with Alpharetta, they would want their own arena, NHL arena built there. I mean, a brand spanking new arena is never a bad thing in the NHL, or in sports in general. It always helps with an expansion bid, eh? But yeah, I could see that. I could see that happening if they built if they had a plan and they had the money to make the plan happen, and they went to the NHL and said, hey, we're building a new arena in Alpharetta, and there's a Houston ownership group that says, hey, we want to bring NHL hockey to Houston. I could see the NHL look at it. I could. I think this is a case of where there's smoke, there's fire. I do think that now, if the Coyotes Tempe Arena vote goes through and it succeeds, which I think it will, I would honestly be more surprised if it didn't. Then I think that really makes this rumor even more credible, because the NHL wouldn't want to have an odd number of teams again. The only reason they had it with Vegas when the NHL was at 31 teams was because they knew, hey, in a couple of seasons, in a matter of seasons anyway, we're going to have a 32nd team in Seattle anyway. So, yeah, for the 2017-18 season, the 18-19, the 19-20, the 21 season, okay, for 4 seasons, yeah, they had an odd number of teams, but they knew they were expanding to a 32nd team. So they thought, hey, we might as well get this new team in Vegas up and running now. And they did. They made it work. But at the same time, the thing is, now they have an even amount of teams. So if they're going to expand again, they would want at least another couple of teams. So if this rumor happens and it ends up becoming reality, wouldn't surprise me. But of course, until something official is announced, it's nothing more than hearsay at this point in time. So with that, folks, I'm going to call it a wrap at this point in time. However, if you are interested, I am going to make a second part to this, but I'm going to make it a separate video. I'll discuss additional details about expansion if it does happen, and I think it'd be better to split this into a second part, just because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about with that. So if you have any comments or anything you want to correct me on, feel free to go in the comments section down below and share your thoughts, or correct me on anything that I've mentioned in the video. But with that, guys, I'm going to call it a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the video if you listened to it all the way through. And until my next video, as always, guys, as I always say, take care. And as always, bye for now.